Okay, so you're tuning in because you want to get a handle on the future of work, right? Especially what it means for young people starting out and the employers bringing them in.
Exactly. There's just so much talk about it.
There really is. So let's dive right into this very useful guide from the Camerick Institute. They've also got some great background research, a literature review, and a 2022 survey covering both youth and employers.
Yeah, and that guide, it's really good at, cutting through the noise, and it helps pinpoint what actually matters in this whole shifting landscape of work.
It does. It breaks things down nicely. Four main sections we'll walk through today. First, assessing readiness, sort of figuring out where youth and employers are at right now.
Right. Then the big trends shaping things.
Then some real life stories hearing directly from young people and employers.
And finally, some useful resources if you want to dig deeper. It's worth noting it was a big team effort, lots of input from a working group and different organizations.
Absolutely. And we should also acknowledge the land. The Tamarack Central Office is on the traditional territory of the Attawandaron, Neutral, Anishinaabeg, and Haudenosaunee peoples.
A really important acknowledgement.
So our goal here in this deep dive is basically to pull out the key takeaways from all this material. Stuff that's relevant, whether you're, a young person figuring out your career.
Or an employer trying to adapt to, well, everything that's changing.
Okay, let's start with that first section then, assessing readiness.
Yeah, this part's really insightful because it gets both young people and employers to kind of take stock.
For young people, it kicks off with some pretty important self-reflection. The guide poses these questions to consider, like really think about your ideal work setup. Are you a remote person, office, hybrid?
Uh-huh. And it's not just about preference, but also about skills. Do you actually know what hard and soft skills are in demand?
Right. And are you showing them off effectively? That's key.
And importantly, what about your well-being? The guide pushes young people to think about their mental health needs, what workplace stress looks like for them.
And what support they might need. That's a big one.
It really is. It also brings up the gig economy. Is that something you've thought about? Do your skills fit that model?
It's all about being proactive, isn't it? Knowing yourself. The questions also touch on mentorship. Have you looked for mentors? What are your personal values? And do you know what you want in an employer's values?
Yeah, and your support network. Crucial. And of course, technology access. Can't forget that.
Definitely not. They use this simple 1 to 5 scale, from not yet to I am there. It gives you a concrete way to see where you stand on these things.
Then it flips to the employer side. Same idea, but focused on organizational readiness.
So what are they asking employers?
Well, things like how good are your hiring processes at actually spotting those soft skills? Are you willing to train people on certain hard skills if they have the right aptitude?
That makes sense. Less about finding the perfect fit, maybe, more about potential.
Kind of. And it also asks employers to look at their own support systems, especially around mental health for their staff.
Oh, interesting. What else?
Outsourcing comes up too. Are there things you're outsourcing that maybe should be in-house or the other way around? It prompts a strategic look at how you use your resources.
So it's pushing them to be strategic and responsive.
Exactly. And engaging current staff on work-life balance. Critically looking at safety, belonging, inclusion within the workplace culture.
And they use a similar scale.
Yep, a ranking scale. And the total score points them towards specific actions they should probably take.
Okay, that readiness assessment sounds like a really practical starting point. Let's move to the second section, the 10 trending ideas.
Right, and the key thing here is these trends aren't separate things. They're all interconnected, shaping this, new world of work.
So what's trend number one?
Hybrid work is the new normal. The guide basically predicts a future where most work involves some mix of in-office and remote.
But it's not one size fits all.
Definitely not. It'll vary a lot depending on the job, the industry, even management styles. Their survey found 36% of employers were already heading towards a hybrid model back in 2022.
But it's not all smooth sailing, is it? The guide points out some challenges.
For sure. Maintaining team culture, that sense of connection when people are spread out, that's tricky.
Yeah, you risk creating like two different experiences for people.
Precisely. Which leads nicely into the second trend, a change in skill set reskilling, upskilling, and harnessing soft skills.
Ah, the soft skills conversation seems like that's everywhere now.
It is, and rightly so. The guide emphasizes that things like empathy, emotional intelligence, adaptability, resilience, these are becoming just as crucial, if not more so, than technical skills.
They quote Zabine Hergy saying these soft skills are future-proof.
Yeah, because no matter how much tech changes, those human elements remain vital.
Makes total sense. Okay, trend number three.
Mental health is a must. This is framed as a top global priority now. It's just not something workplaces can afford to ignore anymore.
But is the reality matching the rhetoric? The guide suggests maybe not entirely.
Right. It cites some U.S. studies that are, well, pretty concerning. Nearly 60% of employees had never talked about mental health at work.
Wow, 60%.
Yeah. And only about a third of those with mental illness were actually getting treatment. Plus, less than half felt their company genuinely prioritized their mental well-being.
That's a major disconnect. So what kind of support are people looking for?
The guide mentions things you'd expect, like employee assistance programs, mental health days, basically tangible resources and support.
Got it. Okay, trend 4.
The gig economy is growing, and it's growing fast, especially among younger people.
We hear a lot about that too. Any stats?
Yeah, they reference a 2019 Bank of Canada survey. Up to 58% of 17 to 24-year-olds were doing some kind of informal work.
58%. That's huge.
It is, and an Upwork report found 12% of the U.S. workforce started freelancing during the pandemic, and almost half of hiring managers were more open to hiring freelancers.
And what about the Camrock survey itself?
Over half the youth they surveyed had done gig work, but interestingly, how they felt about it was mixed. Only around 30% saw it as like a desirable thing.
So it's happening, but maybe not always out of choice or preference for everyone.
That seems to be the implication for many.
What are some of the other trends mentioned quickly?
Okay, let's see. Career pathways need to innovate, so less of that straight ladder climb.
Uh-huh.
A rise in employee activism will require new approaches to leadership. Employees are speaking up more.
Makes sense.
Toxic culture has to go. Apparently, it's a huge driver of turnover, based on a big study.
I believe it.
Then technology is a basic need, but there's still that digital divide issue. Like 71% of employers need stable internet for remote work, but only 27% help provide it.
Oof, that's a gap.
Yeah. And finally, work-life balance for real, not just paying lip service to it and creating cultures of belonging and bringing your whole self to work.
Wow, okay. Those 10 trends cover a lot of ground. They really paint a picture of, well, a workplace in major flux. So let's see how these trends look on the ground with Section 3, the 10 stories from youth and employers.
Yeah, this part brings it to life. One story really stood out about employee activism and pay transparency.
Oh, yeah. What happened?
A coworker found out about some pay discrepancies, and it actually led to them forming a committee to overhaul the whole evaluation and pay structure.
So speaking up actually worked.
It did in that case. It really showed the power of open conversation.
What other stories illustrated these trends?
There was Jessica's story about going fully remote. She talked about gaining back time, finding better balance, a real positive take on the hybrid remote trend, even though we took some adjusting at first.
That's good to hear the positive side, too.
But there was also a tougher story about psychological harassment. It really highlighted how vital HR resources are and the need for people to set boundaries.
Was there HR in that company?
Apparently not, which made it even harder. A real wake-up call.
Definitely. Any others?
Ipeli's story about mentorship was really powerful. How finding the right mentors help overcome barriers and find career direction. Networking was key there.
Mentorship comes up again and again, doesn't
It
it?
really does. And, other stories touched on different angles, unexpected remote work successes, someone being a bit more cautious about all the changes, organizations trying to adapt policies for things like gig work, precarity, and transparent hiring.
So a real mix of experiences reflecting those bigger trends. Now let's shift focus slightly and look at something really critical. The labor market impact on racialized youth. We're drawing from the Future Skills Center report here.
Yes, this is a crucial piece. The report looks broadly at employment readiness for all Canadians, but it specifically calls out the higher unemployment and underemployment rates that racialized youth face.
It's a persistent issue, isn't it?
It is. The report states clearly racialized youth unemployment is higher than the overall youth rate. It mentions 2016 data showing rates over 10% for Arab, Black, and West Asian youth specifically.
And what about those not in education, employment, or training the NEET category?
Racialized youth are disproportionately represented there too. The report points to systemic factors, discrimination, racism, unequal access to resources. These are major barriers.
And the pandemic made things worse.
Sadly, yes, it amplified those existing inequalities.
The report also mentions specific challenges for immigrant youth.
Things like their international credentials not being valued properly, encountering bias. It really highlights the need for clear, accessible information about employment programs. And, crucially, those wraparound supports that address the whole picture.
Wraparound supports meaning.
Like help with housing, childcare, mental health, things beyond just job training that could be barriers to employment.
Got it. Does the report talk about solutions or types of programs?
It does. It categorizes different program types, readiness to learn, school success, work integrated learning, etc. But the main point is the need for more targeted and inclusive programs.
And trauma-informed approaches.
Yes, that's mentioned too. Recognizing and responding to the diverse and sometimes difficult lived experiences of these young people.
Mentorship comes up again here, I imagine.
Absolutely. Access to mentors and role models is highlighted as critical. They give the Black Youth Mentorship and Leadership Program at the University of Manitoba as a positive example.
That's great. What about skills?
There's a challenge with inconsistent ways skills are defined and assessed. Standardized frameworks might help level the playing field,
And the digital divide.
a huge factor. The report stresses that bridging this gap is essential for improving employment outcomes. You can't participate fully without access.
Makes sense. What about learning on the job, like internships?
Equitable access to work-integrated learning is key. Right now, racialized youth are underrepresented in many of these programs.
So many interconnected
It
barriers.
really is a systemic issue. The report also touches on the negative impact of low expectations and stereotype threat. It stresses how important it is to showcase Black success stories and provide strong support in post-secondary education.
It sounds like a really comprehensive look at the specific challenges and needs.
It is. It makes clear that real equity requires a multi-pronged effort.
Okay, let's bring in our final source, the HQCO study. This one focuses on the transition from school to work, specifically for university grads with bachelor's degrees.
Right. And a key takeaway is just how much those first few years after graduation matter for the long term.
So, what helps make that transition smoother?
The study found three things are particularly beneficial: getting practical, hands-on, experiential learning, think co-ops, internships.
Okay,
Second, actively networking, building those connections.
right.
And third, actually using the career resources their university or college offers.
That last one's interesting. Are students not using them?
Well, the study suggests uptake could be better. And what graduates said they really valued were practical, sector-specific workshops,
Like,
mock interviews, resume clinics, workshops on specific technical skills for their field, more so than, say, general career counseling.
so they want the practical, job ready stuff.
Exactly. It seems like the degree is the foundation, but you need that hands-on experience and the network to really get ahead.
Does the study show a direct link between that experiential learning, or EL, and getting a job?
Yes, a clear link. Graduates who did EL were more likely to be employed and employed in their field of study, especially if the EL was directly relevant to their sector.
More so than just having a part-time job during school.
Apparently, yes. While any work experience is good, that relevant EL seems to give a bigger advantage after graduation.
What about those university career services?
Things like skills workshops and resume help are seen as helpful, but it seems like institutions need to promote them better and students need to actually, seek them out more.
A two-way street.
Pretty much. It's also important to mention the study found different outcomes for graduates with disabilities and those from low-income families. They didn't dive deep into why in this report, but flagged it as needing more research.
Okay, so that covers our main sources. Let's try and pull it all together. What are the big takeaways from this deep dive?
Well, first off, the world of work is definitely changing, and both young people and employers need to be ready to adapt. That came through loud and clear.
For sure. And hybrid work seems like it's here to stay, but it brings real challenges around culture and inclusion that need careful management.
Absolutely. And those soft skills, plus a real focus on mental health, they're not just nice-to-haves anymore. They're essential for individual success and, frankly, for business success, too.
And we absolutely cannot forget the systemic barriers facing racialized youth. Tackling those inequalities head on is just fundamental for a fair and effective workforce.
Couldn't agree more. Plus, the value of practical experience, that experiential learning and building networks during education, seems critical for bridging that gap between school and work.
So, for you listening, we'd really encourage you to think about those questions to consider from the Tamarack Guide. Where do you stand, whether you're starting out or you're an employer?
Yeah, take stock. And if you want more practical tools or want to learn more, definitely check out the 10 really useful resources section in that guide.
Lots to think about. Maybe a final thought to leave you with.
Go for it.
How can we all, individuals, institutions, employers, work together more effectively to build environments that are truly inclusive and supportive? Environments that really set up young people from all backgrounds to succeed in this constantly evolving world of work.